Thank you for joining us online today. If you have a testimony or a prayer request, you can text that to us by texting HOTL to 97000. If you would like to partner with us financially, you can text a dollar amount to 84321. We hope you enjoy the message and have a great day.
Well, this morning we're continuing this series on Cross the Road. And we're going to kind of wrap it up. And we're going to come back to the beginning. So when Pastor Jeff began talking about that, he was talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And if you have your Bibles, you can open them up to Luke chapter 10. It starts at verse 25. But you can kind of follow along the passage. But it begins with this teacher of the law who comes to Jesus. And it says he wants to trap him. Now, sometimes we think, oh no. But Jesus is like going, come on, bring it on. Bring it on. So sometimes when you feel like, oh, someone's trying to trap me, realize that the Holy Spirit is saying, just bring it on. Bring it on, okay? It's okay because he's going to do a jujitsu, he's going to do a move on this, and he's going to just turn the tables immediately, and God's going to do a work. So this teacher of the law comes to him and says, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, now wait a second. You read the law, you know it. What do you say you have to do? And so this is an argument in the day. What's the greatest commandments? What are all those different things been going on? So this teacher of the law comes back and says, well, here it is. The Shema says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then it says in Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, you got it right. You do those things, and you're going to live. If you do that, you will live. And the man is like going, okay, I still haven't trapped him. I'm still trying to figure. So I know what to do. So to justify his actions, he says, who is my neighbor? Because my neighbor could be the guy next door that I like. It could be a family member, but it obviously isn't the Roman soldier whom I hate. It obviously isn't that despised Samaritan who say they worship Yahweh, but really they worship some sort of counterfeit way of doing it. Can't be them. So Jesus, who is my neighbor? And so Jesus tells this parable about a man who's going down from Jerusalem into Jericho on a very treacherous road, and he's attacked by robbers, and they beat him. And they strip him of his clothes. Clothes were a valuable object back in then. They strip him of his clothes. He's naked. He's laying by the side of the road. He's bleeding. He's dying. And a priest, a religious person, walks by and puts his blinders up. I don't see anything. Don't see anything. And walks right on by. And then another religious leader, a Levite, who is supposed to be a servant of the people, does the same thing. He walks by and he just puts up his blinders. I don't see. I'm an important person. I can't take time to take care of this. And then we get to verse 33, 10:33. And it says, but a Samaritan, some translations say despised Samaritan, who is traveling, came to where the injured man was, and when he saw him, he felt compassion for him. And it made all the difference. Made all the difference. This word compassion is I can't get it. I got to get the word out. Splankizomai. You got to get that sound in there in the middle there. Something like that. It's a very guttural sound. And it means to be affected very deep inside your being. It's to have this deep, abiding empathy for someone. It's to feel great emotion towards someone. It's this pity or the sympathy or compassion. It's used 12 times in the New Testament there. And it's the same word when you're going through the New Testament, that when Jesus tells the story in chapter 15 of Luke of the lost son, it says the father saw him a long way off and had compassion for him and ran to him That was what he did. He saw him a long way off. Or when Jesus is going to the city of Nain, and there's the widow woman who is leaving the city gates, and there's a funeral procession going on for her son who had just died. And he says he had compassion for this widow woman who has now lost everything. And of course, he goes to the coffin and he says, young man, come back to life. And he did. He had that deep feeling for this widow woman. Or how about blind Bartimaeus, who is crying out, David, or Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, have mercy on me. So he feels compassion for him. Or the crowd, when he says about the crowd, he says in Matthew chapter 9:36, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. That's you and me. That's you and me. He sees us and he immediately has compassion for us. Or how about when he heals the crowd, he had compassion for them. Or when the crowd has been with them for 3 days and they're starving to death, they're starving and they're like going, he says to his disciples, he has compassion. He says, feed them. And they're going, how do we do that? And so he feeds them, of course. These are the ways that Jesus over and over and over again has compassion. So my question this morning is, what will move you to cross the road? What will move us to cross the road? What does it take to get us to move in a direction across the road? Now, I want you to catch something here. Something happened before compassion shows up. You notice in the verse of the Good Samaritan, he saw him. He noticed him. Jesus saw the widow woman. The father saw his son a long way off. He noticed him. Noticing always precedes compassion. And compassion precedes action. We have to feel that compassion to act out of it. But we must notice first. Before we can love someone, we have to notice them. The moment that we show attention, love comes on the scene. You thought about the fact that Jesus is a noticer? He notices us. He pays attention. He notices every aspect of us. And he says that he came to seek and save that which was lost. He said, I'm going to seek you. That's a noticing idea. I'm going to come after you. I noticed you. Aren't you so glad he noticed you? I'm so glad he noticed me. You see, when he notices someone, good news has shown up. You think of Zacchaeus, who's up in the tree. There's a whole crowd of people and there's noise and everything else like that. And Jesus goes, Zacchaeus, come on down from the tree. I'm going to your house today because I want to be your friend. You have been cast out of being a son of Abraham. The people have cast you out. But today I declare that you are part of my family. I notice you. Notice you. In the book, The 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversation by John Curley and Mary Schaller, the first idea is there. If you want to have a conversation with someone and you want to know, how do I have this conversation? How do I move forward? Well, the first step is to notice them. You and I, we must notice first. It is the prerequisite to every other step, every other aspect, every other movement. We have to notice first. When we notice people, we assign them worth as image bearers. We say, you are an image bearer of God. I noticed you. I paid attention to you. I saw you. You're an image bearer. I noticed you. People we have never noticed before all of a sudden matter because we realize they're lost. We realize that they have a story to tell. We realize all these different aspects when we notice them. It's a spiritual discipline. It requires intentionality on our part. We have to be deliberate about noticing people. You and I, we can develop the skill, we can develop that art. We have to make it an intention to notice the people around us. It's like we have to put on special God goggles that show people up, that all of a sudden they're on the scene, that we see them as people that matter. They're lost, they're our neighbors, and they have names. Jesus knows their name. Do you and I know their name? Do we? So often I'm like going, what is that? What is their name? What's my neighbor's name again? If I would truly notice them, then I would call it worthwhile to learn their name. So one of the things with learning your neighbor's name is a way to have a block party. How many of you realize that if you invite your neighbors to come to a block party, guess what? They show up. They really do. You might be saying, well, but Mitch, I live down a 1 mile long driveway. I don't have any neighbors. Well, you know, when you're on the highway, how many homes did you drive by that had a 1 mile long driveway? I bet if you asked them, they would come over to your house. They would come to your house as a block party, and you could learn their names. You could find out about them. But you know what? In our lives, there are like 4 barriers to noticing people. First one is the pace of our lives. In the book, The Life You've Always Wanted, John Ortberg is telling the story. He's shown up at a new church. He's incredibly busy. And he needs to get some good advice from his mentor, Dallas Willard. So he calls him up on the phone. He's only got a few minutes. And he says, Dallas, I need your advice. Tell me what I need to hear in this moment. And Dallas thinks for a moment. And he says, this is it. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And John Ortberg writes it down and says, that's a good one. What's the next one? No. There's only one thing. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. The pace of our life causes this thing called hurry sickness. How many of you, when someone passes you, you're going, oh, no, that's not happening. I'm driving down the road and someone passes me. I'm not going, so I go, oh, let's put a little bit of gas on there. I'm going to get around them. You know, the cars in front of me are going a little bit slow, so I'm zipping in and out of. Anyone like that? Anyone like that? You got to be in the front, okay? You got to be in front because you're in a hurry. You have no idea why you're in a hurry. You're just in a hurry. Or how about you're at the grocery store and there's a line here and a line here, and you're going, which one do I get in? Which one? You get in over here, and then this one gets a little bit shorter, so you move over here, and you're looking where you used to be, and you're watching as they get up there, and you're like going, did I win? Did I lose today? What happened? And then you're happy if you won, if your line moved 30 seconds faster, and then you're unhappy. Oh, if I'd have just only stayed. You know, we are so addicted to hurry. We have hurry sickness. You know what happens, what hurry sickness develops in us? Pastor Jeff calls it this, compassion fatigue. We don't have time. We're like that priest. I don't see you, I don't see you, I don't see you. We don't have time. And that leads us to the next barrier there. It's called self-focus. I am so focused on what's going on in my life because by far, I am the most important person there is, right? Okay, come on. Isn't that how we feel? My time is so valuable. I'm the most important person. I am so self-focused, and I'm so busy, and I want everyone to know how busy I am. You know? Because I'm so important. That's why I'm so busy. In truth, Eugene Peterson writes to us, and he says, it is actually probably close to a sin to say you're busy. Think about that. Who would be so busy that if you walked up to Jesus and he would say, "Oh, I'm too busy"? You know, Jesus allowed interruptions in his life. He said, it's okay, I'm doing a very important thing. I'm going to go heal this little girl who's about to die. And a woman in the crowd touches the hem of his garment, and he stops and says, "Who touched me?" And then stops long enough to minister to her. You see, we have to be willing to be interrupted. And Carrie talks about this, Annie Carrie, in her book, Keeping a Quiet Heart. And she says, when those interruptions come, this is actually a God moment. This is a moment that God has shown up on the scene. We're so busy doing all the right things that we think the interruption is the wrong thing. But the interruption is actually the right thing from the Lord. This is what she says. We're tempted to think that it's a waste of time. But it is really the most important part of the work of the day. The part that I can best offer to God, that interruption. After such an interruption, do not rush after the planned work. Trust that the time to finish it will be given sometime, and keep a quiet heart about it. We are self-focused. Are you willing to be interrupted? Don't you think the Samaritan had a lot of things going on in his life? He did. He was willing to be interrupted. He was willing to cross the road. Number 3, living in a Christian bubble. I grew up in the church. I don't know how many times Sunday evening services happened and I was sleeping on the pew as a little boy, okay? I grew up there. I became a pastor, and it's like, do you know any non-believers? Do you know anyone who's not part of the Christian circle around you? We have a Christian bubble. We have to work to notice people outside that, the people on our job, the people at the grocery store, the people at the gas station, the ones at the gym that we can develop a relationship with, our neighbor. What a concept. Our neighbor. How do we break out of our Christian bubble with our neighbor? We have to overcome this by recognizing people. And then number 4 is having a judgmental attitude. You know, if they'd just get their act together, their life would be better. I may have not said it, but have you thought it? I have. You know, there's a story in John chapter 8. There's this woman who is caught in the act of adultery. And the religious leaders, they come to Jesus and they say, the law says she should be stoned to death because of this. And Jesus says, all right. But in verse 7, he says, let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. They have these stones in their hand, and all of a sudden conviction hits them. They have a judgmental attitude right there. This woman is caught in adultery. She's definitely in the wrong. Let the one who is without sin throw that stone. One by one, they drop their stones and walk away. The conviction was so heavy. The woman is there, and it's just her and Jesus. And Jesus says, "Where are your accusers?" It's only you now, Jesus. Jesus says, "I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more." We have to drop, like those stones, our judgmental attitude. There's a story in Luke chapter 15 leading up to the story of the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son. And it opens this way, Luke chapter 15, verse 1. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. Do you realize they were interested in what he had to say? Why? He saw them as people. He taught them as people. He didn't condemn them, but he noticed them and said, "I came to seek and save that which was lost." He said, "It's not the healthy who need the physician. It's the sick." So it goes on and it says, this made the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. If you and I struggle with a judgmental attitude, and I've been there, we can look at Luke chapter 15 and meditate on it and see what it says, especially when you get to the older brother. How do I deal with those who have messed up their lives? Do you know anyone who's messed up their lives? How many of you have messed up your life at some point or another? Aren't you so glad Jesus didn't give up on you? I am. Yeah. We got to drop that attitude there and ask God to replace that judgmental attitude with a heart of compassion that sees them and pays attention. 2 Corinthians 5:16 says, "From now on we regard no one from a worldly point of view." Second art is the art of listening. You see, we got to notice, and then we have to listen to them. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says this: many people are looking for an ear that will listen. They do not find it among Christians because Christians are talking where they should be listening. Talking where we should be listening. You know, but I got to share my faith. I got to talk. I got to shoot those bullets in there. No, we got to listen. We got to figure out what they're saying. We got to catch their story. In our society today, the best evangelistic tool that we have is the ability to listen. Did you catch that? The best evangelistic tool in our arsenal, in our tool belt, is the ability to listen. We notice and then we listen. This is what Alice Freiling says this: if I want to listen well with love and awe, I need to let go of my need to be right. I need to let go of my many preconceived opinions. I need to let go of my own self-consciousness and insecurities. And I need to let go of my need to appear wise. Oh, Mitch, that one hurts. Good and even spiritual. I have to let go of it because I have to listen to their story. People don't necessarily want a whole bunch of information. They want a friend that listens to them. They want a friend there. When we understand and seek to understand and we're willing to listen, the environment suddenly changes. And what was a hostile environment suddenly becomes a safe environment. And that leads to the next art, the art of asking questions. And we'll close his arts on this one. I encourage you to get the book. It's an incredible book. Help you with that. See, we tend to be very poor conversationalists because we like to talk about ourselves. All right, we talk about the most important person in the room, don't we? That's obviously me, right? I look around, I think that's got to be me. We talk about ourselves. In reality, we don't listen enough, and we don't ask questions. My wife, Keely, is an incredible question asker because she is curious about the person. She truly wants to get to know them. She's curious about their family. She's curious about their occupation. She's curious about who they are and why they're like that. She wants to hear their story. She's curious about them. That's what we have to do. We have to get curious about people, about our neighbor, about the one that we don't necessarily have a whole lot in common with. We have to get curious about them. When Pastor Robbie spoke to the youth at chapel a couple weeks ago, she shared the SLANT acronym. SLANT. And it means you smile, you lean in, you ask questions. Ask questions. You nod as they're telling their story, and you take an interest. Smile, lean in, ask questions, nod, and take an interest. That is how you show worth to someone. That's how you show worth. It says in 1 Corinthians 9:19, this is Paul writing. He says, even though I am free of the demands and expectations of everyone, I have voluntarily become a servant to any and all in order to reach a wide range of people. You see, I just want to reach a little narrow range that are just like me. You know, that act like me, talk like me, think like me. He says, no, I want to reach a wide range. It says religious people, non-religious, meticulous moralists, loose-living immoralists, the defeated, the demoralized, whoever. I don't take on their way of life. I kept my bearings in Christ, but I entered their world. I entered their world. Jesus did that. And I tried to experience things from their point of view. I become just about every sort of servant there is in my attempt to lead those who meet into a God-saving life. Some translations say, I've become all things to all men, so by all possible means, I might save some. All things. You know what that means? We have to lay down our supposed self-worth, don't we? We have to meet them where they are. I want them to come where I am. I want them to come up to my supposed high level. It's not. No, we have to meet them where they are for that opportunity. Have the worship team come on back up. The church that I pastored a few years ago, the rural community. In that process, there was a lady there. Her name was Carolyn. She'd been part of the church for years. Incredibly godly, spiritual, wonderful lady there. But her husband didn't want to have, his name was John, didn't want to have anything to do with church. He thought church people, pastors especially, were hypocrites and busybodies. I wonder why he thought that. You think we could have given him any reason? I don't know. But that's what he thought. He was basically a grown-up hippie, loved to smoke pot, hang out at the taverns, outdoorsy, worked in the woods, did all kinds of stuff, and then he got hurt and had to go on a disability. That's when I met him. Actually, I hadn't met him yet. But we're thinking, how do we get to know Carolyn? Why don't we invite her to dinner? I wonder if her husband would come to dinner. So we asked her, would John come to dinner? He said, well, I don't know. You'll have to ask him. So we did. John, who hated pastors and church, came to dinner because we invited him. In coming to dinner, we learned something about him. We learned he had a philosophy of life. And it was this: love is an open hand, not a closed fist. That sounds pretty Christian to me, doesn't it to you? But he's not. It shows that we bear the image of Christ no matter what's going on in life. So love is an open hand, not a closed fist. So we invited them over to dinner. I had nothing in common with him. But we had a dinner together. And so John was a bit of a foodie. He loved to prepare food. He loved to watch food shows. He invited us over to dinner. So we went over to their house for dinner. Had dinner with him. Served us a great gourmet kind of meal. And then I thought, I wonder if he would go to lunch with me. I invited him. He did. We're trying to find some common ground. We really don't have any. But we're hanging out for lunch together. We're just spending some time together, getting to know each other. He's sharing his stories of how he grew up. Some time passes, John comes down with cancer. Starts undergoing treatment for cancer. We continue having lunches together from time to time. He still doesn't want to have anything to do with religion, church, anything like that. And one of the times we're having lunch together, his adult daughter calls home and says, what's Dad doing? Oh, he's having lunch with the preacher. And she's like, my dad with the preacher? We developed a friendship. Still didn't want to have anything to do with the Lord. It's getting sicker and sicker. And we're about to adopt, by this time we had 2 foster sons. We're about to adopt one of them. When we finished the adoption, wanted to do a child dedication. John loved kids. I said, John, would you come to the dedication service? And he's really sick. And he said, yes, I'll be there. So he shows up, very weak, makes it through that part of the service. By this time, his strength is totally spent. His wife helps him out to the car as that part of the service ends. I leave the service in the middle of our service. It's still going on. To follow him out the door, and I tell him, and he's hurting. I tell him, John, that was the most loving, sacrificial thing I think I've known anyone to do. And he said, well, you mean something to me. A week goes by. John's on hospice care, but he's not ready. So I get a call that he's being taken by an ambulance into the hospital about 30 or so minutes away. So I show up at the emergency room, and Carolyn and I are on either side of the gurney, waiting for his room to open. And he reaches up, faltering strength, and he grabs my arm, and he says, Mitch, I accept Jesus' teaching as a way of life. And I go, what? And he says it again, I accept Jesus' teaching as the way of life. I tell you. So Carolyn is just in tears. I'm in tears. I'm like going, and about that time they bring him up to his room. And there were 2 of his non-Christian friends who had just got there and got to the room first. And John comes into the room, gets wheeled into the room, and he says to them, I just became a Christian. And they're like, what? And he goes, I just blankety blank became a Christian. They get him stabilized. We get him home the next day, and he says, I want to receive communion, and I want water baptism. Now, how do you baptize someone who's bedridden and you're a full immersion kind of guy, okay? So we show up. We serve communion to him. By the way, his non-Christian friends are in the room. Yeah. I use a cup of water. I poured over his forehead. I baptized him. You know, I mean, he had a total transformation in his life. A few days go by. I get the call, and it's time. I go to their home. Carolyn is with John. I'm there with him. And we sing the song. The only hymn he knew was Amazing Grace. And as we're singing Amazing Grace, he slips into eternity, forever changed, forever changed. Jesus crossed the road for John, and he does it for us as well.